Hey, what's up guys? It's pist0lapete, and today I wanted to go over a little layout template that I put together. I'm going to post it on my website here later today. But it's pretty simple. I just started out by, I created a new folder called layout template on my desktop, and my two files are in here. This is my HTML file and my style sheet. Index.html style sheet. Basically the name is just style.css. So I'm going to go ahead and open these with Notepad++. If you don't have Notepad++, you can either use regular Notepad or whatever text editor you like to use, or you can just Google Notepad++. Download it for free, take you like 5 minutes. So here's your code. Here's your HTML code, your style sheet, and this is what the layout looks like in a browser. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit here, kind of give you, if I can get my mouse to work, give you like a nice good visual image of what that layout looks like. It's basically this black section right here is what I call the master container. It contains all the other div boxes, div elements within this master container. So here's your header. Here's your navigation bar. Here is a content section. Here is boxes. It's called the 3-box method is what a lot of people call it. And that's because of these 3 boxes down here. Box 1, box 2, box 3, and a footer. And if you see this yellow line going around those 3 boxes, that's the box container. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later. But back to the code. Here's just your standard HTML tag, opening and closing tag. Here's your header tag, head tag, and your body tag. Here's the link tag, the link code that links back to the style sheet. So you want to throw that in there. Make sure you're using the right name to link back to the style sheet. Make sure that your HTML file and your CSS file are in the same directory, or it won't work. And then your title, which I know I went over this in the past, but that goes right up there. And that's pretty much it for the head section. The main part of this tutorial is the body section, and mainly these divs right here. Like this is, I mentioned earlier, the master container. Well, you see how it goes all the way down? See that red line? That master container, that opening div tag right there, doesn't close until the very end of the document. So that's how you get everything contained within like within the browsers basically. So we can launch this in any browser we want, and with that div container and the way everything's kind of laid out, it looks good in every browser, even though all of them are kind of a little different and they'll have their own little quirks and little idiosyncrasies. But I mean, that's 4 browsers right there, and it looks good on all 4. So that's kind of the nice thing about using something like this master container. And so basically, there's your master container HTML code, which links back to the style sheet. And this all goes in the same order on the style sheet as it does in the HTML doc. There's your master container style sheet code. All it is height and width that specifies the height and width of your div box, your div rectangle on when you see it in the browser. The background color, again, black, and when you use this margin auto, it auto centers it, so you don't have to eyeball it. It's kind of like in Word when you auto center text. So, and then finally, so there's your style sheet, your HTML file, and then if we run that in the browser, once again, this black section is that div container. So the next section is our header section, which is right here. Just another div. The ID attribute is header, and this ID, basically this ID equals header attribute right here, is always going to correspond back to the CSS file, and wherever the hashtag is with the header name, This is the code, the styling code that gets associated with this ID, this attribute right here in this div element, this div tag. And so, and then these H1s, those are just headings. You don't have to worry too much about those. But basically, yeah, you can kind of see where you get the code in the HTML document. This is all font styling right here. The margin auto to center, and then the height, width, and background all corresponds to this header. And then when we run it once again in our browser, that's what we're looking at. Next section is your navigation. This is the navigation bar. I used classes for all of these in all these attributes, and basically this is just a navigation. This is kind of like another container. It contains an unordered list, which means it's not numbered, and then these are all the list items, these li element tags right here, and they all contain a class. And I just use the class top because I think of it like the top navigation menu. Sometimes I use a footer, like a link box at the bottom of some of my sites, and so I'll just call that class equals bottom. So this is why I call it top. This is just kind of my own personal thing. But once again, it's just a list, and then this is the list item, and then within each list item there's a link that would link you to, for instance, the home page, services, or blog. And you might have to study this section a little more than the others, because when we go back to our style sheet, this is where the nav, I put some comments in there to warn you when that navigation menu begins, just because it is a little more complicated. And so right here, that's all your navigation code that corresponds back to your HTML document. And I won't go too in depth in this. A lot of it is just font styling, like right there, and then making sure you're centered. And this is basically the container. And then this stuff kind of gets hairy in here, so just kind of look at it, study it, familiarize yourself with it. You can basically just copy and paste this right off my site, though. You don't have to write any of this yourself, so you can just experiment, and if you mess something up, just go back again and re-download or re-copy and paste the source code. So next section, this is the content section. I put a little disclaimer here, kind of telling people, nature, landscape images go well as long as it relates to the subject. Anyway, a lot of people will use a slideshow in this section. I'm not going to go over how to do that now. I might do that later though. But for the most part, a nice high-res image will work in there. So if you come back to your style sheet, here's your content code. Once again, height, width, background. This is actually the font color and the font styling right here. And then once again, just your auto margin. And if you look at that in the browser, this is what you're looking at. That's your content section. And I forgot to show the navigation bar in the content section. Basically, this is probably the smallest, second to the smallest section in the whole document, and it uses all this code to create that. And so this is the HTML code for the navigation. This is the CSS styling for the navigation, and this is what it looks like in a browser.